The sun bled slowly into the horizon, painting the wide Wyoming plains in shades of amber and rust. The air carried a dry, smoky chill that clung to the land like a warning of winter. Jack Harlow stood on the porch of his crumbling ranch house, his shoulders hunched beneath a faded flannel shirt. His hands were cracked and dark from years of work, his face carved by wind and disappointment. The chipped mug in his hand steamed faintly, though the coffee inside had long gone cold. He stared across the fields where his cattle once grazed thick and fat. Now they were ghosts against the dust, ribs showing, heads bowed, searching for grass that no longer grew. The fences leaned like drunk old men, the barn roof sagged in the middle, and the once proud Harlow ranch looked more like a forgotten promise than a livelihood. He rubbed his jaw, the stubble scratching his palm, and muttered to himself, "Ain't much left to fight for, is there?" It had been 2 months since he'd last paid rent on the land. The drought had eaten into his pastures, the market had turned cruel, and the bank had stopped pretending to be patient. He'd thought about selling a few more cattle, but at this point, that would be like tearing pieces off his soul. He had no plan, just stubbornness and an aching kind of pride that kept him from asking for help. Then he heard the sound, hoofbeats, slow and deliberate, echoing through the dry air like the march of fate itself. Jack looked up. Across the plain, riding through the dying light, was a figure so large it made the horse beneath her look small. The sun framed her in a halo of fire as she approached, dust swirling around her boots. He narrowed his eyes against the glare and felt his stomach tighten. He already knew who it was. Big Annie Dalton. She was the talk of every saloon from Casper to Cheyenne, a Texas giantess with the reputation of a storm. Some said she could haul a full-grown steer onto a wagon bed without help. Others swore she once broke a horse just by looking at it too long. She had money, land, and the kind of power that made men twice her size nervous. And now she owned the Harlow lease, the land Jack had called his since boyhood. She reined in her horse in front of his porch, the animal snorting clouds of dust. Then she swung her leg over and dropped to the ground. The earth itself seemed to grunt under her boots. She was enormous, broad-shouldered, long-legged, built of sun and sinew. Her duster coat billowed behind her as she stepped forward, her gloved hand resting on the belt that carried a coiled rope instead of a gun. Her hair, a deep red brown, caught the sunset and burned like copper. Jack straightened, pushing his hat up. "Evenin', Miss Dalton." She stopped at the base of the steps, her gaze steady, her lips curved in something between amusement and authority. "So you say you can't pay your rent." Her voice was deep, smooth, and laced with a teasing drawl that made the words sound almost like a challenge. Jack took a slow breath, setting his mug down on the rail. "That's right. Been a bad season. The rains never came, and..." She cut him off with a raised hand. "The rains never come for anyone, Harlow." But somehow, the strong still managed to eat. Her eyes, hazel with flecks of gold, moved past him, scanning the broken fences, the dying grass, the hollow look of his land. "You got good soil," she said after a moment. "Just needs the right hands." Jack's pride prickled. "These hands built this place." "Then maybe they got tired," she replied, her gaze snapping back to him. He clenched his jaw. "You came all the way out here to insult me." She laughed, a low, husky sound that didn't quite reach her eyes. "No, cowboy. I came to collect what's owed." Jack stepped down from the porch, meeting her eye despite the fact she stood nearly a head taller. "You'll get your money, Miss Dalton. I just need more time." "Time." She tilted her head, that half-smile tugging at her lips again. "Time don't fatten calves. Time don't fix fences. And time sure as hell don't fill my account." The wind tugged at the ends of her coat, carrying her scent, saddle leather and rain that hadn't fallen in months. Jack's pulse thudded in his ears. There was something about her presence, something unshakable, like standing in front of a mountain that had decided to start speaking. He wanted to tell her to leave. He wanted to tell her this was still his home, even if the papers said otherwise. But when she took another step forward, the porch creaked under her weight, and his words dried up. For a long moment, they just stared at each other, the worn-out rancher and the towering cowgirl who now owned his life in ink and law. Finally, she broke the silence. "Maybe there's another way you can pay what you owe." Jack frowned. "Another way?" Annie's eyes gleamed with amusement. You've still got hands, don't you? I've got fences needin' mending, herds that don't move themselves, and not a single man in 3 counties who can keep up. You work for me till spring. You give me your sweat instead of your coin. Then we'll call it even." He blinked, caught between offense and disbelief. "Work for you?" She shrugged one massive shoulder. "You're welcome to pack up instead, if you prefer. I've seen men run faster for less shame." Her words burned hotter than whiskey. He'd been called poor before, useless before, but there was something about the way she said it, that low, knowing tone, that made his pride twist like a knife in his gut. "I don't run," he said finally. "Good," she replied softly. "Then maybe there's hope for you yet." The last of the sunlight broke across her face, outlining her in gold. For just a moment, Jack thought she didn't look like a woman at all. She looked like a force of nature, something too big and too wild to belong to this world. He hesitated, his fingers flexing at his sides. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll work." A slow, approving grin spread across her face. "That's what I thought." She turned back toward her horse, her boots kicking up small clouds of dust. Before mounting, she looked back at him over her shoulder. "You start tomorrow at dawn. And rancher," her smile turned sharp, playful, almost dangerous, "don't be late. Giants don't wait on little men." Then she swung herself onto the horse in one effortless motion, gave a sharp whistle, and galloped off into the burning horizon. Jack stood on the porch long after she was gone, staring after her. His heart pounded with something he couldn't name, anger, maybe, or awe. The wind brushed through the dry grass, whispering her words again and again. He lifted his hat, running a hand through his hair, and muttered to the fading sun, "Well, Harlow, looks like you just sold your pride to a giant." The land was silent again, but somehow, it didn't feel empty anymore. The morning broke sharp and cold, the kind that bit through flannel and made every breath come out like smoke. Jack was already awake before the sun rose, his boots scuffing against the frost-covered ground as he saddled his horse. The barn smelled of hay and old sweat, and somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon cooed softly, unaware that the world below was shifting. He wasn't sure what he expected from the first day of working for Big Annie Dalton. Humiliation, maybe. Orders barked like insults, maybe even her laughter when he fell behind. What he didn't expect was how quiet the land felt that morning, how the horizon stretched endless and empty, as if holding its breath for whatever storm she might bring. Then she came, riding through the dawn like she owned it. Annie's horse was black as a night without stars, its mane rippling in the cold wind. She didn't ride fast, she rode with purpose. Her duster coat trailed behind her like a shadow. The faint light caught the metal of her spurs, and each clink sounded like a challenge. She reined in beside him without a word, scanning his horse, his tools, his clothes, and, he thought, him, too. Then, with a simple nod, she said, "Let's work." The next 12 hours felt like a lifetime. They started by repairing the eastern fence, half a mile of bent wire and half-rotted posts. Annie swung the sledgehammer as if it weighed nothing, driving stakes deep into the ground while Jack carried new wire and tools behind her. Her movements were fluid but forceful, every swing measured, every pull deliberate. He'd seen men break their backs on less work, yet she seemed carved for it, like the earth had built her from bone and iron just for this life. Jack worked silently beside her, sweat soaking through his shirt even though the air was cold. His hands burned from the wire, but he refused to slow down. Pride was a strange kind of fuel. It didn't fill the belly, but it kept the body moving when sense said to stop. By mid-morning, they'd mended most of the fence. Annie finally paused, pulling off her gloves and leaning against a post. Her eyes scanned the horizon. "You do decent work," she said simply. Jack raised an eyebrow. "That's supposed to be a compliment." "Supposed to be what it sounds like," she said, smirking faintly. "Don't make me regret it." He chuckled softly under his breath and kept working. She didn't talk much after that, but she didn't need to. The rhythm of their labor spoke enough. Hammering, stretching, cutting, tying. Two people, bound by necessity and silence, building something together even if they didn't trust each other yet. When the sun hit its peak, she called a break. They led the horses to a stream shaded by cottonwoods, where the sound of water was the sweetest thing Jack had heard in weeks. Annie knelt to drink, cupping the cold water in her hands. Jack watched her reflection shimmer on the surface, the strong line of her jaw, the way her hair fell loose from her braid, and those eyes that always seemed to be measuring the world. He cleared his throat. You work harder than most men I know. She glanced at him over her shoulder, water dripping from her fingers. You sayin' that as a compliment or a confession? He grinned. Maybe both. She smiled then. Just a flicker, but real. You learn fast, Harlow. They sat in the grass, eating jerky and dry biscuits. The silence between them softened, turning companionable instead of heavy. Jack looked out across the land, the rolling hills fading into the horizon. You ever get tired of it? He asked quietly. Of what? This. The work. The fight. Annie leaned back on her elbows, her hat tilted over her eyes. Every damn day, she said. But quitting don't get you anywhere worth going. Jack nodded slowly. The words struck something deep inside him, a memory of his father saying almost the same thing years ago, back when the ranch still thrived. He swallowed hard, feeling the ache of old ghosts. They didn't talk much after that, but something between them had shifted, something subtle, like the way wind changes before rain. The afternoon stretched on. Annie pushed him harder than any boss he'd ever had, and though part of him resented it, another part respected her for it. She didn't just bark orders, she worked beside him, never asking for anything she wouldn't do herself. When a stubborn steer broke loose near the southern pasture, it was Annie who leapt onto her horse first. Cut him off on the right, she shouted, her voice sharp as a whip. Jack spurred his horse, racing beside her. The animal thundered across the plain, muscles straining, dust flying. Annie moved like she was born in the saddle, every motion precise, commanding. She swung her rope and caught the steer clean around the neck, hauling it back with strength that didn't seem possible. Jack pulled up beside her, panting, his heart pounding from the chase. Annie's grin flashed beneath her hat. You can ride, she said. I was born on one, he shot back, grinning despite himself. Good, she said, tightening the rope. Means I won't have to babysit you. By sunset, they'd repaired the fences, wrangled the stray cattle, and cleared the brush near the north gate. Jack's muscles screamed, his hands raw, but there was something else in him now, a quiet satisfaction, the kind he hadn't felt in months. He'd earned something today, maybe not money, maybe not pride, but something solid, something real. Annie dismounted and tied her horse to the post, her silhouette tall against the orange sky. The last light burned across her shoulders, and for a moment she didn't look real, more like a statue, carved out of the land itself. Jack wiped his brow and said, You're not half as mean as folks say. She turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. Don't test that theory, cowboy. He laughed softly, shaking his head. Guess I'll take that as a warning. She walked closer, stopping just a few feet from him. The air seemed to thicken, humming with something neither of them could name. Her voice dropped low, serious now. You did good today. You keep this up, and you'll have your ranch back before spring. He looked at her, really looked at her, the strength, the fire, the strange kind of loneliness in her eyes. You really think I can save it? I think, she said, you're too damn stubborn not to. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and dusk. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. The dying light caught her face, and Jack realized she wasn't just powerful, she was beautiful in a way the land was beautiful, wild, unyielding, and honest. He wanted to say something more, but the words tangled in his throat. Annie adjusted her hat, broke the silence, and said, Be here at dawn tomorrow. Giants don't like waiting. Then she swung onto her horse, her silhouette fading into the coming night. Jack stood there long after she was gone, the sound of her hoofbeats echoing in his chest. He looked around at the land, the fences fixed, the cattle penned, the horizon breathing again, and felt something stir in him that had been dead for a long time. Maybe it wasn't just the ranch being rebuilt. Maybe it was him. He ran a hand through his hair, smiling faintly to himself as the stars began to bloom across the sky. Guess I can keep up with a giant after all.